going to take something that was related to Reframework basic part. Yeah, over to you, Pradeep. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Iker. So today we are going to discuss about RE framework. So let me notepad. Is my voice is clear?
Yes, Pradeep.
Yeah,
Yes.
yes, yes.
So we are going to discuss about RE framework template today. So why we need to use this template, when we are going to use this template, what are the advantages we have it when we are going to use this template. So let me open the template also. So when you open the UiPath Studio, so here you can able to see the robotic enterprise framework. So it is from the template. So just we have to double click on it. So you'll get that particular framework. So let it load. So basically, when we are using the RE framework, it will download some kind of actions and it will download some kind of workflows, and you will get some kind of pre-built template. So why we need this pre-built template and what's the use of this pre-built template means? So you are going to build one of the project. So you have implemented the some kind of coding development for it. But if you want to make it as a best practices, if you want to apply some best practices, we have to do some kind of things for it, your code, right? So whichever the best practices you have to follow for your code. So these all the best practices will be available in the RE framework. So that's where we can use the RE framework as a template. It's just a kind of template. Whichever the coding you are going to do it, you can do that coding in the same coding in this particular RE framework template to make your code as a robust. So that's what we can use RE framework as a robust coding purpose. So let me explain a couple of best practices what we have it in RE framework. So when you use the RE framework, so it is having some modularity. So modularity means whichever the if you are working for any one of the project, so you have to test each workflow independently, right? So you are having a login workflow and a logout workflow, and some entering the details in any one of the application or extracting the details from any one of the application. So this is a kind of high level of automation you are doing it, but whichever the high level of automation you are doing it, you have to do it in the modular perspective, because when you are going to test it, you have to test it individual component. You can't test the entire project at once. You can test the entire project at once, but after the unit testing we have to do the integration testing, right? So when you are doing the unit testing, it should be a kind of a modularity. So that particular modularity is available in RE framework. When you see that, so each module, so this is each state. Inside this each state, we can able to see multiple modules. So let me show you one of the module. So this is init all setting is one module, and this kill all applications are kill all process is the one module. So it's divided in the modular perspective. So why we can say that is one of the best practices means when you are doing the debugging. So it's very easy. It's very easy to do the testing for entire uh, coding perspective. So that's one of the advantage we have it when you are using the RE framework. And next one is error handling. Yeah. So error handling. So when you are using the RE framework, by default, we have developed code for error handling. We know, right? we have two types of exceptions. So one is a system exception, one is business exception. When you are working for high level of your project, so system exception means if any of the application is not responding, like if you are working on any Excel, the Excel is not Excel got corrupted or Excel is not responding. So if something happened related to the machine perspective, so that will come under the system exception or business exception. Business exception means we have to raise that exception. We have to raise that exception means we have to do the process for only the candidate who all are having more than 10,000 in their account. So if you are checking the balance of the customers and if the account balance is more than 10,000, then only we have to enter some details. So if it is a less than 10,000 means what is that? So it's a kind of business exception. We have to skip that or we have to do some alternative for them. So this is how we have system exceptions and business exceptions. So these system exceptions and business exceptions were handled in RE framework. So how we can handle system exceptions and business exception? So if you are getting a system exception, what we can do means if that particular any of the browser is not responding, then what we have to do? We have to reopen it. We have to close that particular browser and we have to reopen it and we have to do the process, right? So that's how we'll do. So, like if you are going to book a tickets in the Book My Show, when you are opening the website for booking the ticket, so it got corrupted or it's not working as you expected, then what will you do? So, just you will close that particular browser and you will open it again and you will try to book the tickets, right? So, this is a kind of system exception you got it. So, you are reperforming the same action again. So that is system exception. For the business exception, if you are going to do the retry also, there is no use because as per our condition, if you are getting, if you are having more than 10,000 of account balance, then only we have to do some process. Otherwise, we no need of doing. So how many times you are checking the balance will be the same. So it's no need of using, no need of doing the retry for business exception. So that's how. So for the system exception, we need retry. So we need to retry a number of times based on our criteria. So till if it is facing the same exception, then we have to stop the application. We have to stop the bot processing. For the business exception, just business exception scenario, we have to implement it. Got it? So here, where we have implemented these, you can able to see when you go to the high level. So in the initialization, if you are getting the system exception, so it will come here. So in the get transaction data, we won't get any system exception. So if you are getting system exception in the process, so here you can able to see. So this is for business exception.
Why did we lose the connectivity, or is only for me?
Yeah, I
I
think
think we'll
we just lost him. We'll be just waiting a couple minutes. Yeah, actually, Pradeep is facing some power cut issues. He'll be just joining in 2 minutes. If not, I'll just continue the session.
Okay.
Sorry everyone, I rejoined again. So I faced some technical issues. So let me share my screen again. So is my voice is clear? Anyone please confirm it.
Yeah, it's clear.
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
can see
So
your
we are
screen.
yes, please. So we are done with the modularity and error handling. So let me cover about the logging mechanism. So if you are working for any of the larger project, so how we are going to know where your workflow is running and where you are getting an errors or how much time will it take to complete the entire remaining process. So you have to know about it, right? So if you want to know about it, how you can know. So that will be happen based on the logging mechanism. So logging mechanism means each workflow will have some kind of log messages like this login workflow started, this init section is started, init section is ended. We are in the part of get transaction data now. So each transaction, the first transaction is picked up and it's working on the first transaction. Then it's done with the second transaction, third transaction. So it will give some kind of messages in the output pane, or it will give some kind of messages in the orchestrator log. So that's what we'll get it in the RE framework. But if you want to implement it, you can implement it. But by default, it implemented for few of the things which we got it in the RE framework template. So it's very easy to understand the code when you are running the bot. So this is one of the feature we have it in RE framework. And the next one is configuration. This configuration is like it's same. Basically, RE framework is a template whichever the basic things you have to do it to develop the project. the basic things, everything you will get it in the RE framework itself. You no need to work on these basic things again to do it. Like these basic things are useful for all the projects. So if you are working for any Excel, or if you are working for mid-level project or large level project, or working for healthcare project, financial project, or any other project. So whichever the common things you have to do it, whichever the common points you have to follow as a UiPath developer, you will get everything in RE framework. So one more advantages we are going to discuss is the configuration. Configuration means you are working for any one of the login page. So the login page is just the URL we need to use. One of the URL we have to use it, and we have to enter your username and password. Okay. So you have implemented the code for it. So after 1 month, this URL got changed. So the URL is like www dot something abc dot in. So then what we have to do, we have to enter the username and password. Okay. So we are done the automation for it. After 1 month, what it is going to do? So they have updated their website to www.abc.com. So how you can do that? So you have implemented the code for this one, and they updated the your URL to www.abc.com, but it is in the code. You have moved this code to the production. So how you can do the change of it? Because if you move it to the production, you won't get an access to the code. So you can't change these particular dynamic values whenever you right. So that's why what we have to do, we have to keep these kind of dynamic values. So this is one of the dynamic value, and username is one of the dynamic value. Password is one of the dynamic value. Why? Because the username will be the same, but the password we have to change it every 45 days, right? As per the company policy. So whichever the passwords we are having, we have to update that password after every 45 days, right? So whenever you are updating the password, you have to update for your bot also. So otherwise you will get an error saying that the username password are not correct, right? So that's why we have to store these particular dynamic values somewhere, reflect whenever we need whichever the value, right? So these particular things will be configured in the configuration file. So we have one of the configuration file that is called as a config.xlsx in the format of Excel format. So we have to get that values from it, and whenever you require to change the values, you can change it from the Excel file, and you can associate that particular assets. You can associate or you can call the assets from the orchestrator also. So the functionality I'll show you when I'm opening the RE framework. As of now, just I'm explaining the advantages of it. Just you can go through the high level, then you will get an idea. Okay, for these all are the perspective we can use that. Yeah. Then one more advantage is like separation. Separation is the kind of same as a modularity, I can say, but here the separation means we have different states. See, init stage, get transaction data stage, and the process state, and the end process. So here each state will do some kind of functionality. The init stage will initialize all the applications, whichever the applications you want to do the automations, and get transaction data will do some kind of data access. So whichever the input data you want to do it for the processing, so it will add the data here. And the process here, once you're able to open all the applications, once you get the input data, whichever the process you want to do it, you have to do the process here and the end process. So once you are done, so you have to close all the applications. So it is very much clear, right? So the separation of the states are very much clear. So wherever you are getting an error, it's easy to identify and it's easy to know where you are getting an error. So this is one of the advantage. And one more thing is reusability. Reusability. Reusability means if you are implementing any of the workflow, so you have to use that workflow multiple times whenever you require it, right? So one of the example is I can say login workflow itself. So the login workflow. So what we are going to do? So you are going to do the login mechanism. So after that, when you are doing the login, so what happened? You are getting some kind of exception, like before entering the, when you are going to enter the password or when you are going to enter the username, you entered some kind of mismatch of value. So it's couldn't able to log in. So what you have to do at that time, you have to do the retry mechanism. You have to do the retry mechanism for it, right? So that's where reusability will come. So we are using the same workflow multiple times. After closing all the applications, after doing everything again, you are using the same reusability of that particular workflow, right? So that's one of the point. And one more point is sending a mails. So mails will send in different ways. So once the entire process is success, we'll send a mail. When you are getting a system exception more than 3 times, we'll send a mail. So if you are getting a business exception, we can send a mail. So sending a mail is, we are doing this functionality for multiple scenarios, but sending a mail is same, right? So the content is different inside the body of the mail, but it's same to use the sending mail operation for everywhere. So that's where it come into the picture. We can use RE framework reusability component. So the sending mail component is a reusability. So we can use that. So we can send a mail anytime. So that's one of the advantages as a reusability. And one more thing, last advantage I can say, that is best practices. So we have to follow the best practices when we have implemented the workflow. So here we have one of the few of the best practices are implemented in RE framework. So first thing is whenever you are going to open the applications, we have to close that particular applications, right? Once you are done with your automation, we should not keep that applications are open. So if you are using the Excel applications in your code, so once your automation is done, we have to close that Excel application. So if you are using Chrome application, we have to close that Chrome application. That is one of the best practice. And a logging mechanism. So you should know the workflow where that particular logging workflow is going on, and some kind of annotations, and giving the proper values for the arguments and proper values for the variables, uh, proper values for these things, and transaction management. Transaction management means basically RE framework is implemented for transactional workflow. So transactional workflow means if you are having 100 transactions, so that particular 100 transactions will be done one by one, right? So how that particular 100 transactions will be done one by one? What is the mechanisms we are doing it in the RE framework? So first it will come here in the initialization. It will just plug in all the applications in the get transaction data. It will check all the available transactions, which are the available transactions we have to perform. Then it will send each transaction here. Then once the transaction is done, again it will navigate to the get transaction data, and again it will pick. So it's a kind of transactional workflow. It got builded. Uh, and closing all the application. So here in the end process, we can generate the report and we can send it. So whenever you are done with the entire process, we can do the generating report. So these are the best practices we have it. So that's why we have to use RE framework template to make your coding standards as a robust. So do you have any questions as of now regarding the advantages? So once we are done with the advantages, I'll explain about the framework, how this framework got built. So wait, if you want to use this framework where you need to import your code, I'll explain about it. So I can give 1 minute in the chat window. So if you are having any issues, we can discuss. Yeah, I think there is no much questions. Let me check. I want to know how to make variables as a dynamic. The variables as a dynamic, we can do that based on the perspection. So like if you are using the counter value, so the counter value is if you assign that counter as a one, so based on the looping mechanism, you have to increase that particular variable count. So the first loop it will be one, the second loop the value will be two. So the mechanism, whenever the mechanism is going on, the counter value will be increased, right? So at that time we can say the variable is dynamic. Yeah. Can we remove state and add state? Yes, we can do that. So that will come in under the part of customization. So I'll explain now. So I am going to showcase the RE framework now so that I can explain about the few things about the customizations and few things about how to use the RE framework. So So here is the RE framework. I opened it. So when you have created a RE framework, by default, you will get this entire workflow will be showcased in your machines. So when you observe high level, so you can see four states and seven transitions, right? So the first state is initialization, and the second state is get transaction data and process, end process, right? So how these things are working? So what is the use of each state and how these states are connected with different transactions? What is these transactions? So let me explain you clearly. So the first part is when you started, it will come into the initialization. Basically, this RE framework is built based on the queue transactions. So queue transactions means if you are getting the data from the queue as a transaction item. So if you want to process each transaction item, then we have to use the RE framework. So other than that, if you are getting any other type of input data, we have to do the customizations for it. So let me explain if we are getting the data in the queue format itself, how we can do that. So this is the first initialization part. Initialization part is we can get to know, right? Initialization means in doing the initialization for your process. Initialization means we have to gather all the things for your automations. So gather all the things means what we have to get it. So whichever the applications you want to use it. Let me give explanation for it. Yeah. So let me tell you my high level automation. So the first part, just I need to log in one of the application. Uh, then I have 100 transactions in the queue. 100 transactions in the queue means some details. First name, second name, and some other details I need to enter. Uh, Entering in web-based application and doing the logout, and I need to send a report also. Report means end report, how many we have done. Okay. So this is my high level of automation. So just doing the login of application, then getting the 100 transactions from the queue, and entering the same details into the any one of the web-based applications which we have done the login, then doing the logout and some end report, creating some end report for it. Okay. So how we can implement this particular project in RE framework? So in the initialization, we have to use all the applications which we are going to use that. So let me open the same Excel. So here this part will come into the init because we are using the application. So we can implement that login workflow in the init, and we have to go with some kind of details also, right? So you got an application URL, but you have to get some username, password, and how many times we have to do the retry. We need some configurable details, right? So we have to read all the configurable details in the init section itself. So what we are doing here in the init, so we are logging the all applications, and we are reading all the configuration values in the init section. Okay. So from the init section, we have two transactions. One is system exception, one is one is success. So if you are getting system exception, what we are doing directly, we are going to the end process, and we are killing that particular applications which we have opened, and we are stopping the workflow of our bot. If everything is success, then what we are doing? Then we are coming as a success. Then we are going to the get transaction data. If you are getting system exception, why we are not coming to the get transaction data means you are facing some issue in opening the applications itself or reading some config details itself. Then what is the use of coming to the get transaction data? There is no use, right? So that's the reason it's going to the end process. So if everything is success in the initialization, then it will come to the get transaction data. In get transaction data, what we are going to do, we are going to read the data from the queue. This coding should be done in the get transaction. Okay, so we are reading the data from the queue. That particular each transaction is having first name, second name, and some kind of details of that particular person. So what we have to do next, we have to enter the details into the web-based application. So here you can see you got all the data of 100 transactions, but it won't send 100 transactions at once to the process. What it will do, it will send each transaction like transaction 1, transaction 2, transaction 3. So in that way, it will send each transaction to the process. So this is the one of the transaction. So this is the using this particular transaction, it will come one transaction, second transaction way. So if you are done with the 100 transitions, so then what it will do? So it will go with this way, saying that no data, we are done with all the data which we are, which we need to perform it. So what we can do next? So then we have to go to the end process. We have to close all the applications which we have opened it. We have to generate the end report and we have to send it. So that will be happen in the end process. So if everything is good, everything is going good, and we have a couple of transactions to do, it means it will process one by one transaction here, and it will come to the process transaction. In the process transaction, what we have to do? So as of now, what we have? So we have opened all the applications. We have done the reading of configuration details, and the applications and opened in your machine, and you got the data of input data from queue. So what we have to do, using that input data, we have to enter the data in that particular applications. See here, so this particular piece we have to enter, we have to do the development in the process, right? So we are done. So when you are doing the entering, so for one of the value, one of the transaction, you got only first name, not the last name. So as per our criteria, the first name and the last name should be the mandatory field, but not getting the value. So then what it is? So it's a kind of business exception. So if you are getting a business exception, then the transaction will go in this way, and here it will do the particular operations based on your business exception. You are going to just skip it, or you are going to send a mail to the business team saying that I didn't get a value of last name in the input data. So please check it or something. So in that way, we can send some alert to the business team, uh, and we can do the operation. So if you are getting a system exception for it, system exception means if you are going to enter, username or password, if you are going to enter first name and last name, if that application got stuck, so that application is not responding to you. So then how? So what we have to do, sometimes if the application is not responding, what we have to do, just we have to close that application. See system exception, where that system exception is going. So when you get a system exception, it will navigate into the init. So in the init, what we are doing, we are opening that applications again, and we are reading the configurations, right? So that's how it will come again from the first point. Why we have to do the closing of application when you are getting the system exceptions means, as we said, we are having 100 transactions. So entering the data of 100 students in the same applications repetitively means sometimes what it will happen, the application may hang out. So at that time, what we have to do, just close that application and enter the details again. So, right. So that's how it will work. So this is the way, if you are getting a system exception, just we have to enter that particular details in the initial, just we have to close that application and open that application again. And we have to uh, perform whatever the actions we are going to do it again. So if it is success, okay, so we have not seen any system exception or business exception. If it is success, means you have entered one of the transaction details in the web-based application, then you have to pick the next transaction, right? So here it will read one more transaction. Okay. So it will go to the get transaction data. It will pick the next transaction. Again, it will do the same process. If it is a success, then again, it will pick the new one. So if you are if you are done with the transaction, then if you are done with all the transactions which we are having it in the queue, then it will go to the no data. It will come to the end process. So in the end process, it will send some kind of a process report, or it will send some kind of a mail saying that we are done with our automation, and it will close all the applications and it will stop the code. So this is the high level of RE framework we have it. So I hope everyone is clear about the high level of orchestrator. High level of RE framework, what kind of stages we have it, in the each stage what we are going to do. So as per the customizations, you are not using the data from the queue. Okay. And your automation is not transactional. So this is one of the example of process, right? So one more automation is like we have to do the login. Then in the web-based application, we have to do just we have to uh, mark the attendance, then log out. Okay. So instead of this particular work automation, I have to implement this automation. So here is that particular automation is transactional. Transactional means you are doing the same process repetitively. So 100 transaction. So we are doing the same process for the 100 transactions. But here, when you see just doing the login and going to the web-based application and mark the attendance, you are marking your attendance, then doing the logout. So it's not transactional. It is a non-transactional process. Means it we are going to perform this action only once. We no need of looping mechanisms in RE framework, and we are not using any queue data to get it right. So in that time, what we have to do? So we don't require get transaction data, because get transaction data is used to get the data from queue, right? We don't require to get any data from the queue. And here in the get transaction data itself, the looping mechanism is going on for the each transaction. So we don't require any looping mechanism also. But then how you can use that? Then how you can implement your code in the RE framework? Then what we have to do? just we can remove the get transaction data and we can use process. And however you can use that, we can use in this way. So what will it happen here? From the get transaction, from the init, it will log in the applications. In the process, it will do entering of, it will mark the attendance and it will go to the end process. There is no looping mechanism and we don't require any looping mechanism for it. So this is how we can do the customizations for your code. So these states are not mandatory. So they builded these states to use in our code to make it some kind of robust, right? But it's just a template which is useful for all the process, not for specific process, not for specific automation. So this is a template, we can use it for anything. So wherever you require to make a change, you can do that. Wherever you want to add any state, we can add it. Wherever you want to do some kind of uh, additional automation best practice, if you want to add any additional best practices, we can add it. So it's a kind of fully customizable RE framework. Wherever you want to do the change, you can do that.
Pradeep, can you show how to add one?
One more state.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
Just anything if you add experience.
yeah. Yeah. So here, so we have get transaction data. From the get transaction data, we are reading the data. We are processing the data in the process transaction, right? So if you are having the process, doing the process mechanism in the two steps. Like if you want to keep any of the state is having the same kind of process mechanism. So whichever the data we got it, we are doing the process here, right? So once this process is done, few of the items like let me explain you in the notepad. So you are having 100 transactions, okay? So 100 transactions we are doing it. For these 100 transactions, one by one transaction is coming. So one transaction is came, we have entered the first name and second name and some detail. So once it is approved, then we have to do some kind of other operation. If it is not approved, then we have to go with the next transaction and we have to do the entering of details. Okay. So for that approval, if you are getting some few minutes of time, so you entered, okay. So it will take 10 to 15 minutes to get an approval. So in the meantime, what will you do? So in the meantime, you can enter other applications also, right? So if you get an approval for that particular details which you have entered, to check that particular process, you can implement the code here. So it's a kind of independent thing. So once you get an approval only, this particular process should perform. So what we can do, so here from here we can do one more logic, say checking is that particular transactions were marked as approved or not. If it is approved, then only it will go to this particular transaction. So otherwise, so it will work in the same way. If it is approved, then it will come here. And from here, if after marking and approve again, it will come into the process itself. So this is how, so based on our criteria, we can add the states also.
One more small question.
Hmm.
In initial stage, you add the data to the queue, right? Like, go to initial stage once. Yeah, you log in or you take some Excel data, right? Add to the queue. For example,
No,
this data.
we won't add any data here. So if you want to add it, we have to implement the coding for it. So basically, RE framework is implemented to get the data from the queue. So if all data is already added to the queue, just you want to get the data from the queue, you can use the RE framework. So it's a kind of performer way we can get the data in from the RE framework.
Yeah, as you said, we can delete that initial, right? If we already have data in the queue and we
Hmm?
do get transaction, the second
Hmm.
thing is get transaction, right? So we can delete the initial, right? If you don't want it.
No. Initialization is not to add the data to the queue. So the
Hmm.
initialization part is logging the applications. So
Okay,
whichever the
keep everything
application,
ready.
yeah, you keep everything ready. Yeah. So before doing performing your process, we have to get some details, right? You have to get that application should be opened, and you have to get that particular value should be available in your workflow. To make these things, we have to use the process init. So that particular applications, the whichever the init applications you want to use it, all the applications will be opened in the init block.
Okay, okay then. I have one more question. If you give time at the end, I'll ask.
Yeah, please.
You want me to
We
ask
can,
now?
we can. Yeah.
Yeah, there's some simple thing already asked. See, we'll pass a variable in a selector, right?
Mm.
So to make it dynamic, you telling like, if that variable has like, URL, we have to change if it is changed. So in
Yeah.
config file, we change, right?
Mm.
So can you
Mm.
show me where that config files are available and how we change, how in a process we get that from the config file?
Sure, I'll tell you.
Yeah.
Basically, that part will come tomorrow's session. So
Yeah,
that's
yeah.
when we
Okay.
are working on the RE framework, I can show you, but I'll tell you in the high level where we can do that. Okay.
Yeah, okay, okay. Okay.
So the next thing is let me show you when you have installed the RE framework, whichever the things will get it. So this is the RE framework project. So when you see, by default, we'll get these XAML files. So let me explain you each XAML file, why the each XAML file and what is the action it can do. So this is the close all applications. Close all applications means whichever the applications we have opened, if you want to close all the applications, we have to do the coding here. And the get transaction data. This get transaction data is getting the each transaction item from the queue. We can use get transaction data. And init all applications. Init all applications, it will be in the init stage, whichever the applications you want to do the init, whichever the applications you want to call it, we can do the particular operations here. And init all settings means configurations values, we can read it here. And kill all process, close all applications, kill all process. The difference is closing means we are closing with a save. Kill means forcefully we are closing that application. Sometimes the applications won't close, so we can do the kill also. Then the process, this from here the process where we have to implement our code. The as per our process, whatever the code we have to implement here. And this is retry logic. So as we said, by default we'll get some retry logic. The retry logic will be available in the retry current transaction. And set transaction status means once the transaction is done, so we have to mark that transaction as a success or failed or the business exception, right? So here in this workflow, it will mark as a particular state and take screenshot. Take screenshot means when you are getting the system exception, you will mark that item as a system exception, but after that you want to know where you got a system exception. So how you can see? So we can see it using the screenshot activity. So it will capture that particular application point and it will store it in our folder. So these all are the workflows we have it. And we have data also. In the data we have config file. So in this we have config file. So here we have three sheets: setting, constants, and assets. So here we can make the values as a dynamic. So if you want to make values as a dynamic, as we discussed, if you want to make URL as a dynamic, if you want to make the URL as a dynamic, what we can do? We can do like login URL. So here I am making that. Yeah. So here we are reading the data. So how we can get this value? So this value will get based on the key. So when you call config of login URL, you will get the value of www.abc.com. So after that, so in the future, this got changed it to the in. So what we can do? We can do the change here itself in, but there is no change in the key, right? So whichever the key we are using, that the key will be the same, but the value is getting changed in the config file. So this is how, so we can get the values from the config file. So this is the kind config file where we can store the values.
So we read this Excel file or it automatically UiPath gets this Excel file?
By automatic UiPath will get that Excel file. So here in the project, when you see the framework, in the framework I showed you, right, init all settings. So this is the workflow. We'll use it to read the config details. So it will give an output file as a dictionary. The output file is a config. So in
So
that config,
sorry, continue.
yeah, in the config file, we have that key and value pairs for each value. So whenever you call that particular key, you will get the value as you expected.
So here only we do everything, edit and prepare before we start the process, right? Before, I mean,
Yes.
when we are
So
coding, we don't do
yeah,
anything with the XAML files you showed in folder, right? Here only these XAML files just present there, but here we do everything.
no. Here you will get it by default here itself in the init section. When you go there, so see init all settings. So when you go inside that particular workflow, so here it is, see, so it's reading all the data from the Excel file and it is assigning it to the dictionary. So the
Yeah.
entire functionality is there itself.
Okay, that's what here only we do like everything. And
Yes,
if we get errors in this, what we will do? When
that's
we
what we
reading,
have
when we
discussed it. So that is the part of init stage. If you are getting an error, if
okay,
the
system
system
exception.
exception, then error. Because if you are getting errors in the init stage itself, there is no need of going to the get transaction data.
Yeah.
There is no need of going to the process. So that's why we are going to the end process. If everything is success, then only going to the get transaction data and process state.
Got
Yeah.
it. Thanks.
I hope everyone is clear with this RE framework. We'll meet tomorrow again for the next topic.
Sorry to cut you. Can you show again once how you opened this? I missed initially.
Which one?
The entire RE framework. Do we have
Okay.
to create initially or do we have any
No,
template?
just go to the studio. Here you can see RE framework. So just you have to
Robotic.
do the double
Okay.
click. Then
Robotic
it's
express.
from the templates.
Okay.
So in the
Yes, we have
template,
to edit it as per
yes.
our.
So once you got it, just you can do the customization based on our project.
Sure. Okay.
Yeah. Thank you.
Hello,
Yes,
Hariharan
please.
here.
Yes.
Yeah, I understood that RE framework is a combination of dispatcher and performer model. Am I right? So, if someone asks to develop the dispatcher and performer separately as a RE framework, can we do that?
Yeah, dispatcher and performance, we can do that. Like basically, the dispatcher is a normal sequence. We can do that. For the dispatcher, we don't require any RE framework. So what we can do, you can implement it in the sequence. If you want to call that sequence in the RE framework, you can call that. Like you can club both dispatcher and performer in the same RE framework. We can do that, or you can make it as an independent also. That's based on your project requirement.
Okay, so basically dispatcher and performer can be separate, and dispatcher can be a sequence and performer can be an RE framework.
Yes, that's true. Because the dispatcher we have to run it only once, but the performer we have to run it in the multiple times in the multiple missions, right? So when you are running it in that way, so we should not club both at one workflow, one RE.
Okay. Let us say if we have a workflow which will add these transaction items to queue. Okay. So what is the best practice to keep this workflow in which state? I mean, init state or get
We should not.
state?
First thing is we
What
should
is the
not
best
keep it
practice
here.
to keep this workflow where we
Yeah,
can keep?
that's what we should not keep it here, because if you are running it to the multiple machines, what it will do, it will add the duplicates to the queue. So that's why we have to generate one of the other workflow where we can add it only once to the queue. So we should not do it here.
Okay, we should not invoke any kind of that adding queue in IRE framework.
Yes, we should not. So if you are going to run it only once, means we can do it in the init.
Okay.
But as per the
Got
best
it.
practices, we should not do that.
Got it. Thank you.
Thank you. If you are having any doubts, we can connect offline. You can send a message to my WhatsApp. We can discuss.
Sure.
Thanks everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you, Pradeep.